name is Naretha. You know what's amazing what's happening right now? The presentation of Reframed is not working. And it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay because it is my story. So I'm going to share with you my story today. But before I start, I want to get an idea of any of you, just by show of hands, have you ever felt discomfort? We have something in common. Maybe I should have rephrased that question. Have you ever felt discomfort of the self? If you have felt any form of discomfort, especially discomfort of the self, have you asked yourself, where does it come from? Why does it exist? And it's often the lack of asking those questions that's the biggest problem. I am someone that is in love with questions. It's my obsession. So I've been a thinking facilitator for over 20 years. And I coined the idea of a thinking facilitator because people ask me, what is that? And I'm like, wow, let me tell you. I had to find something that is an umbrella that encapsulates what I love doing. I am an integral coach. I am an artist. I'm a leader. I'm a parent. And what those things have in common is that the ability and capability of leading and guiding through asking questions. So, I have a gift. My passion and my gift is that I'm actually really good at facilitating thinking for people and for organizations. Hence that I call myself a thinking facilitator. Now, why am I telling you this and how is it even relevant to you? I have a story. Hello, I'm on TikTok. Of course there's a story. It always comes with a story. So I am going to tell you my story of the need that I had to reframe my thinking. I grew up, firstly, in a white Afrikaans community. I was a little tomboy. I grew up on a small holding just outside Pretoria. And I was raised by a beautiful, loving two parents. There were two. I was one of those. I had a very solid family. I was the youngest of four. And of course, I was the only girl. And I was born in the year 1974. So I just want you for a moment, just get yourself into 1974. Are we there? Right, I know that you're going to see some very floral patterns, most likely, and some dodgy curtains. But yes, that was the year. That was the year I was born into a white South Africa. What happened in that era, if you're from South Africa, might be familiar to you. My story was that although I was born into a white South Africa, and although I was born and raised in a white Afrikaans community, my reality was that I grew up in a very free world. My childhood can be described in one word: freedom. My freedom was a happy childhood. I have very fond memories of us going on camping holidays by the coast. I was raised on a small holding where I had all the freedom to play, to get dirty, and let my imagination completely run free. What I knew as a child was freedom and happiness. While I had that freedom, the world that I existed in was very different from the world that was happening around me. The world that existed outside of my world didn't have that freedom. In fact, they were banned from it. While I could go play on a beach and have holidays, others, different from me, were banned from it. Although I could enjoy certain things in my life, there were apartheid. There were rules and regulations set by law to say that people that were different from me, we were literally separated from each other. However, while I was a happy, free child, I was oblivious to what was happening around me. Round about the same time I was riding on my little red bike on that dirt road, it was round about the same time that Hector Peterson, a 13-year-old boy, was shot dead in the student unrest in Soweto. I didn't know who he was. I have no idea that the unrest happened, nor did I have any idea of a lot of those kind of social political events that happened at that time. I only got to know about it when I was much older. So you get the picture. My world was a protected world. My world was guarded from that reality. So what I understood to be freedom was challenged. Then in 1994, I know what happened in that year, the first democratic elections, my world shifted. Not just my world, the South African landscape shifted. My Afrikaner community, white community, shifted from being empowered to becoming the minority. Then a year later, at the age of 21, my world changed radically. My father died. And what that meant is that the stronghold, the anchor that I knew in my life was no longer there. I felt loss, and I felt at a loss. My world was completely shifted. But it was the beginning. That radical disruption was the beginning of a transformative journey. It gave me a reason to look at my life with a new lens. And that lens was a curious, critical lens. It gave me almost a permission to say, well, what if I were to look at my life a little bit differently? Because, see, I was raised in a culture where children didn't ask questions. They had to listen. If you did ask questions, you were either seen as rebellious, disobedient, disrespectful, or plain simply just too curious. And I was a very curious child. I'm a born creative. And when I did ask questions, often I was met with unresolved answers, or things just didn't quite get clear to me. But I was a very curious child, and I did start to notice things. And I would start to ask questions like, why were the workers on my property or on our property not allowed to use the bathroom in our house? Why did they have to use one outside? Why could they not use the same plates and the same cups to drink from? But I didn't get the answers I was looking for. What I was left with was confusion. But I'm not a confused person. I need to know answers. So my curiosity grew even stronger. What even confused me a little bit more, and the white Afrikaans church that I went to, was that I had to hear a repeated and a reinforced message. And that message that I heard almost every Sunday was that we were the chosen people. It left me even more confused, because what made us so special? What did that mean then? Because others were described as heathens or dangerous. So I left it with confusion to go, but then what made other people less important? And what made us so special? So then the journey of awareness started happening. With the loss of my father, it almost gave me permission to start asking more questions, see my life in a bit of a different way. So I started to ask really tough questions. First, I questioned the Afrikaner Calvinistic ideology, a conservative one. When I started looking at it with more awareness and more curiosity, I became aware of an elitist ideology of racism, discrimination, and inequality. I also started to question leadership, because the pictures that I looked at was a neatly arranged row of men. And I started asking the question, why were men the only real important decision makers? And where did women fit into the bigger picture? The challenge was, I didn't see myself in it. I had no place in that picture. So what happened was, I realized that the frame in which it was positioned was too narrow and too limiting. My frame needed to work for me. The frame needs to work. And that frame had to be broken. I had to strip that frame apart. The frame was basically where I had to go, take all the indoctrinated, institutionalized framework, strip it apart, remove it completely, and ask myself, and this was my dilemma, if you remove that you so well know, and you were raised that way, what am I left with? What do I truly believe? The dilemma was I had to face my core. And my core at the end were my values. My values at the end is not limited to a framework. Those are my values. So what happened was that I just wanted there's three things I'd like to share with you today. So it's the three core things I'd like to discuss. And how does that relate to you? Firstly, there's the idea of choice. We all have a choice in the way that we live, our values that we choose to live by. We also have a choice in the cultures that we create. We have a choice in our behavior. We have a choice in the ideologies we choose to believe in. Transformation is a choice. To conform is a choice too. Conformation is the antithesis of transformation. I could no longer conform. The second one is to lead with curiosity. If it wasn't for my curiosity, I wouldn't be able to lead. And we are all leaders here. Every single one of us, we are all leaders. And the leader that you are first and foremost is the leader of the self. If we can lead ourselves in a more authentic way, we can be better leaders for other people. And as leaders, we have a responsibility. Our responsibility is to create cultures or environments that are inclusive so that everybody can feel that they can belong. And then there's discomfort. So if we can just circle back to discomfort. We all face discomfort at some point of our lives. And maybe yours may not have been as a radical emotional disruption as mine, or maybe you did. Maybe you did have such a disruptive moment. But our responsibility is to face that discomfort. We need to lean into it. Because if we lean into discomfort, something happens. Like I said, I faced my core by doing that. If it wasn't for that discomfort, transformation wouldn't have happened. Discomfort is often the beginning of a transformative journey. If you put the word discomfort, and you just imagine it on a screen, and you take the dis away, you're sitting with comfort. Comfort is just as important to face. Because guess what? Frameworks can be highly comfortable. And it's that comfort that often is the challenge itself. And it's time to maybe face that comfort you're sitting in too, because leaders, true leaders, authentic leaders, don't go for comfort. They choose usually discomfort so that would be the beginning of evolution, of transformation, and ultimately also innovation. So my simple formula is something like this. So this is where you take notes, right? To go into a transformative journey, and innovation itself is a transformative journey. It all starts with curiosity. Curiosity is what leads to developing awareness. Without awareness, there cannot be insights. So from awareness, we develop insights. Without insights, change cannot happen. And once you've got the insights and you know what that element of change is, that is where the reframing happens. That is where you know what needs to be reframed. Because you can see things differently. And once you've gone through reframing, that is where it leads into transformation. The change happens. That change, and what happened to me, and what happens if you go through a reframing process, is that it changes your way of doing, but more importantly, it changes your way of being. And when you change your way of being, that is where transformation happens. That is transformation. The freedom that I thought I knew shifted completely. And I found true freedom. My true freedom was when I realized I have freed my thinking. That was my true freedom. So I'm going to end it and leave you with one question to go think about. And I wish you all the best with your transformative and your reframing process and journey. You need to ask yourself, what matters most? Thank you.